Morning. We've got Reggie Perryman on with us today. I'm super excited to talk with Reggie. I just got a couple housekeeping things, then we'll get into that. Let me get let's see here. Stop share. I'm a little out of practice. Okay. Got a couple things that we'll talk about, and then we will get started with Reggie. So just a couple quick announcements. Number one is on the 14th of July, that's next Tuesday, so a week from today, we have our diversity group meeting at 3 o'clock from 3 to 4 here at the office. We're doing that live. I know 2 weeks ago when we did it, it was live and Zoom, but the live atmosphere seems to work better for interacting with everyone. So join us Tuesday at 3 o'clock for that. And then immediately following that, starting at 4 o'clock, we have a taco truck, which will be out in the parking lot, and they're going to come, and we've got different tacos to eat and hang out and have a good time. So join us for that. There is a sign up going around that Jess will get out to you. So just a couple things there. Make sure you're checking our training calendar for the week. Some really awesome events happening. Nick Thoma's doing a mastermind on Friday. Definitely clear your calendar for that. And then I'm actually teaching a models course. So KW is known for our models, and I'll be teaching that every Thursday for the next 5 weeks. We're going to go over each model of Keller Williams. So if you're sitting there saying, I don't even know what that is, or how does that even affect me? You need to join me for those classes. They're quick, they're 1 hour each. We're going to overview the model. And then if you want to get into deeper, after I do the overview for the next 5 weeks, we're going to go deeper on that. But I'm going to have a lot of focus on that for the remainder of the year. So join us for that. All right, well, let's get started. Reggie, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
We're excited here. So I'm going to do a little intro, and then I'll let you kind of say your thing. But from what I know, Reggie, you've been in the business 26 years. You're a previous broker owner.
Yeah.
You're an ALC member with our Royal Oak office. You've sold over 5,000 homes, and you currently have a team that you've built. Is that right?
Correct.
Awesome. What did I miss?
Actually, it's been 28 years.
28 years. Okay.
Yeah.
28 years. So you got started when you were like 12?
Yeah, 19.
19, because you don't look like you've been in the business 28 years, Reggie.
Yeah, real estate has been good to me, so I age well.
Good. Well, why don't you tell us how you kind of got started?
Actually, my grandmother was a real estate investor, and she passed away when I was 19, actually. So I was kind of forced into the business because she had several rental properties. I had to go through probate and everything, and I was like, why don't I just go ahead and get my real estate license? So that's really what got me started. And from there, I went and worked at Century 21 for 10 years. I had the jacket and everything. Gold jacket and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long were you with them?
I was with them for 10 years. And what's funny is actually when I went to start my own brokerage, I had a partner, and we originally were going to open up a Century 21 franchise. And probably about 6 months into renovating, we brought a commercial building, and 6 months into renovations, I told him, I said, we need to be independent because Century 21 is not where it's at right now. And we walked away from a $25,000 franchise deposit.
Wow.
Because financially it didn't make sense. They wanted $1,000 a month minimum, or 10% of gross commissions. So as a single agent at that time, I think I was making maybe about $80,000. And I started calculating, if we had 20 agents in the office, we would have been paying Century 21 a great penny. And the market was shifting. We were going into a different type of market, which means, this was around 2003. So the brand name for Century 21 just wasn't enough to support us at that time.
So you got into the business, so that would have been, you got in around 93? Is that right?
92 actually.
92. Okay, so you got into 92, and then for the next 10 years, you're with Century 21, and you're building your business, right?
Right.
So when you get to this 2003, and you're like, okay, now I think we're gonna branch off and do our own thing, or open the C21. What level of business did you have at that point?
I was at that point, to be honest, I was just a good agent. I
Yep.
had no idea what I was doing. I just knew how to sell homes. I knew how to imitate the broker model that our brokers had, right? So agents were 50-50. Once you got to 14,000, you graduated to a 80-20 split. And they also had 100% model where if you were 100%, you would just pay a flat fee of $600 per month. But you keep 100% of your commission, but you did not receive any like floor time. That was for the more established agents.
Right.
And the idea of teams were not around at that time, at least not in our market.
So building over those first 10 years, I mean, obviously you just came in at 19 years old. So how did you build up to the point where you had at least the confidence to say, I'm going to be the broker. I want to run it.
Oh, it's a lot of trial and error. I sucked, right? So probably my first 3 to 4 years, because you have to keep in mind. So I tell people this all the time. Nothing motivates you like DTE and whatever your mortgage company is, right?
Sure.
And at the time, I didn't have any of that. I had, it was Michigan and Detroit Edison. And so my first 3 years, I think I may have made 13,000. But, as a young 20-year-old, I didn't have any bills. I had utilities, but I didn't have a car note. I didn't have a house note, and I didn't have any kids. All of that changed, right? And I realized 13,000 a year, 18,000 a year was not going to cut it. I was actually getting ready to get out of the business. I was going to move to Atlanta. I had a lease agreement signed for my house. And like 3 days later, my broker came to me and asked me, did I want to go to Sweat Hogs, which was a Floyd Wickman course.
Yep, sure.
And I said, yeah, sign me up. But I didn't know it cost $600, and I didn't have $600. So he paid for the money. I went to the course. This was in November. I think this was 96, I believe. And and I was broke. I mean, really broke. I had like $80 to my name. And that's not good in the middle of November in the winter in Michigan. So I went to this course. It was a 3-month course. You went once a week. And from November to February, I ended up getting 17 listings. And starting in March after the course, I was closing like 2 to 3 deals a month. I had my momentum going. And basically, the whole class just taught us how to cold call. We would get the Bressers, if any of you remember the Bressers.
Yep.
It was a book, a directory book. You open it and you just call by street. You just call all the numbers listed. And it just taught us how to cold call and get listings. And that's how I eventually just stayed in the business from the things that I learned from that class.
So you would get and for those of you who don't know what the Bressers is, it's basically a phone book. So you get the phone book out and you just start calling and you're just asking people, all right, do you have any interest in making a move?
Exactly.
And they say yes or no. If they say yes, then you set up an appointment. If they say no, do you know anyone else? And then you move on to the next call, right?
Yeah, but my sweet spot were the people that said in 3 months.
Sure.
So if they said 3 months, I'll put them in a Rolodex. So right now I'll put somebody in for, October, but I'm calling these people back in September and saying, hey, you said you're going to sell next month. Let's meet next week, right? And get the ball started, because most people don't know how long it actually takes to list and sell a property in the closing process.
So this is in around 96, you said, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you do this, and now you start picking up business.
Right.
Right, and now you get a little bit more momentum moving,
Right.
And then, so for the next, 5 years or so, now this is where you say, okay, well, now I'm doing well. I mean, I'm doing okay, I guess is what you said, because you just
Right.
said I can mimic the broker model. That's no problem, right?
Right.
And then, so then at that point, you say, I'm going to branch out. We're going to open our own C21 office.
Right.
And then you said, actually, that's not what we're going to do. And you lose your money. You lose your 25,000, right?
Right. I don't look at it as a loss looking back at it. So
Awesome. Tell me more about that.
so a couple things between the Floyd Wickman course and opening our own office, what really gave me the confidence was the fact that prior to that, I didn't do enough production to be 100% agent because the broker didn't want me to commit to paying $600 a month if he didn't think I can afford it.
Right.
So the first step was I became 100% agent, and now I was forced to generate my own business and my own leads. So I had my private line. This was before cell phones were really popular and affordable. So I had my own office line. I ran my own advertising and everything. So I was basically my own business at that time. And that's when I looked at it different. And so I was generating some money, and another agent in my office, we decided we were going to start flipping properties, right? And we did very well with that. And we had an investment group, and that's what led to us deciding to do our own real estate company, because we realized that owning a brokerage was not only a way for us to have a good business, but it also attracted a lot of sellers. And every seller did not want to put their home on the market. And people that wanted to sell their homes for cash or sell them quick, they would call brokers as well. So it was a way for us to have opportunities for investment, as well as have a good business where we could make money off of agents and other things. So our seed money came from us buying and flipping investment properties. And then we brought the commercial building and paid the deposit to Century 21. But the lesson I learned in that, I learned about taxes and capital gains. And because keep in mind, even though I was more successful than what I was when I started, I had not broken that $50,000 or $60,000 ceiling yet, right? As far as commissions were concerned. But from the flipping, I think we made like $180,000 in 4 months, right? And this was just buying small, back then, $15,000, $20,000 homes, putting maybe like 5,000 or 6,000 into them and selling them for 45,000. This was east side of Detroit, Moraine, Cashew area.
Yeah.
Selling them to first-time home buyers. And I never made that type of money. My partner had never made that type of money. And we just didn't understand tax strategies and things of that nature. We were just happy to make that type of money. And we just put all that money into the commercial building. And then I got the tax bill, and I was like, whoa, all the money was spent. So yeah, when we started the Century 21 franchise, before we had our launch date to open, we were still renovating the building. And I just ran the numbers one day, and I just seen that Century 21 was just not the brand that it used to be. And I just couldn't make sense of paying 10% of gross closed commissions every month to a company that didn't really have a local branding. Nationwide, they were still pretty good, but here in Detroit, it just wasn't. I didn't see the support there.
So you get to this point and you start looking at it and you say, this probably isn't what I want to do anymore with C21. You've got a decent, I'd say a very successful investment business running. And like you said, you're still kind of doing a mediocre at best real estate business. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So now you said, scrap Century 21. I'm going to open my own company, right? Okay. So take us through what that looked like and how many years you ran that.
All right, so our company was Century 21 Ritz. We dropped to Century 21 and just became Ritz Realty. Unfortunately, me and my partner parted ways. He kept the commercial building and he kept investing. He was never really into the real estate business as far as a brokerage. He was just in it for the opportunity to invest. So that was fair. I wanted to have agents and a whole big,
Yep.
brokerage team. And, with all that being said and done, I walked away from that business with $600 in my pocket because we had accumulated some debt, property taxes on the building, and everything was just financially just crazy. I had $600 in my pocket. I had a few deals pending, and I went and found a small office in Oak Park, and I just kept things moving. So when Gary talks about red light, green light,
Mm-hmm.
and expenses, I mean, I really played that game without learning it from anybody. I didn't run any ads. I didn't do anything. I just started working my old database. I went back to the basics of cold calling. Um, and I had a few connections. There was a company that brought a lot of investment properties, and they went bankrupt. It was called Remco. They went bankrupt, and they had an asset management company called Sigma that was liquidating all of their properties.
Mm-hmm.
But they did not list their properties with any broker, but they would allow you to sell them and advertise them. So I would just run ads and say, hey, I have over 200 foreclosed homes for sale. So I would get calls, and then I started realizing that, hey, a lot of people are getting into this REO thing.
Yeah.
And I just started signing up with these companies. They would have you do a ton of BPOs for free. Some of them would pay you. And then I got into REO. And when that started, it started off slow because the market was still somewhat strong. This was before the crash. But a lot of people were buying those homes and flipping them. And I realized, hey, I'm selling a person a house, they're fixing it, and then they're coming back to me to list the property. So I'm getting paid twice off of one client. And that kind of led me into getting into REO. And I made more money during the crash than I did any other time in my career.
So now we're in like the late 2000s, 08, 09 during this
Right.
crash. And now is this where you're now finally starting to pick up more of the real estate momentum from like the retail side? Okay. So tell me like, what was your income or sales level around those years? And we're talking the recession.
Right. So I was grossing over $1 million during those years. The net was roughly, I was bringing home just over 200,000 because the expenses were high. One
Mm-hmm.
thing about the REO business, it will force you to be a business owner and have systems, which I didn't understand it until, actually I left and came to KW. But there were a lot of things I was doing wrong as far as tracking. And there were some things I was doing absolutely right. So to give you an example, let's say, for instance, at the time it was Countrywide. Countrywide to give you 10 listings and say, hey, you pay for all the utilities. You have to pay for the biweekly lawn service. You have to pay for the rekeys, and you pay for the trash outs. You submit your invoice for reimbursement. They'll reimburse you 30 to 45 days later. So you were fronting all of this money up front for these banks. And then I started tracking in QuickBooks. I had my assistant break it down per asset management company or bank. And I realized that, okay, this bank, I'm spending $4,000 to hold this property. The commission is only $1,000, but I'm getting reimbursed 30 to 45 days later. And this bank is only giving me 10 listings a month versus another bank that's giving me 30 per month. So we started dropping accounts because it just didn't make sense financially. And then you run into issues where your assistant didn't submit all the invoices, right?
Yeah.
So if you if you don't meet those deadlines, you're not getting reimbursed. So there were times, I remember one year I was over 40,000 with Fannie Mae that we did not recover, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you multiply that times several different banks, you can easily just by not pushing a button or sending a sheet of paper over, and some banks were still using fax machines
Yeah.
at that time. So you can easily have an account, even though you're making money, they still owe you $30,000 or $40,000 that you may not get because they said you missed the deadline.
Yeah, no, I've been in the business since 2002. So I went through the recession. I did the BPOs, and I ended up getting some of the bank listings, not as heavy as you. So I remember that. And I remember my broker at the time saying, you got to front the money for all this. So if you don't have it, don't even start. And it's right. I mean, it's true. If you forget to submit something and everything's done, good luck collecting on that afterwards too.
Right.
So what I want to do, Reggie, is I want to take one step back in your story, and then we're going to jump forward. And I want to go back because during the recession, you're heavy into the REOs, and you're doing well with that.
Right.
So you're grossing $1 million, you're netting over 200. I mean, life is good for you at that moment. Before that, you had said like, I'm just struggling to get by. You weren't doing much with your real estate business. Was it the REOs that kind of like launched you into a quote unquote a successful business, or was it a ramp up? What did that look like the years leading up to that?
So the years leading up to that, I was just kind of, I would call it drifting. And in real estate, that's where you're making enough money to pay your bills and you have a little bit left over.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any targets. I didn't have any major goals. I just knew I had to make money and pay my
Yep.
bills, right? So that looked like, 70,000 a year, and I was fine, right? But I
Yep.
wasn't trying to go out and buy the big house or the big cars. I wanted all of that stuff, but I didn't have a focused goal,
Sure.
right? I was coming out of the previous situation, just trying to figure it all out, trying to figure out the brokerage thing. I didn't have a set number of agents. Any agent that applied to be an agent at my office, I hired. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
I knew I was busy enough to have an assistant and things of that nature, but there was no focus there. There was no real structure, right?
Right.
My agent trainings were like, you come in, you follow me, and I'll teach you on the fly. There was no system in place. So it was just really, to be honest, I was just an agent that owned the office.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah.
With the ability to hire other agents that probably were going to just drift along as well.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
I mean, I was making money and I wasn't struggling anymore, but one disaster could have changed all of that. I'm just fortunate it didn't happen that way.
Yeah. Okay. So you're drifting around your own business, and then you've got some people who you'll just hire, and they're kind of drifting around. Everyone's drifting together.
Right.
And then you get into these REO business, and you're starting to pick up some steam with that, and you're doing really well. So
Right.
now let's come out of that. We come out of the foreclosure boom. Where are you as far as Ritz Realty is concerned, and when do you end up cutting that off?
All right. So Ritz Realty. So the thing with Ritz, I was up to 26 agents, and REO was good, but it started dying off. Right.
Yep.
I remember one meeting with Bank of America, and they were like, I kid you not, the asset manager said this should no longer be your primary business.
Wow.
Right. That was coming from an asset manager who had just sent me 20 listings the week before. Right. Fast forward 3 months, when we're used to getting 20 or 30 listings a month from each bank, now you're getting one listing a month, right? And I had two, I'd never seen the houses. I had two field inspectors that went out. All I did was operated the business. I had an assistant for the office, and then I had a bookkeeper, and I had another assistant that would oversee all the admin stuff for the banks. But yeah, it wasn't enough business coming in to support that model and that system that I had set up. And we started doing a lot more short sales and things of that nature. But the REO business basically was dead as we knew it. But again, this goes back to understanding tracking, because I knew things were changing and I knew the income was decreasing based on the REO sales. We, as a company, we didn't transition quick enough back into the regular retail business. And the agents I had, you have to keep in mind, the agents were used to, just to give you an example, I remember I had a listing over in Detroit. The phone would ring and the person says, "How much is the house?" And we said 15,000. And the person said, "I have that on me now," like literally cash, right? We say, "No, that's not how it works. Go get a cashier check, meet me back at the office." It was just that simple to sell a home. So when you have 26 agents, our complaint was not enough leads. Our agents were so swamped with phone calls, they demanded that we had at least 2 to 3 agents on floor time at once because they couldn't handle the call volume, right? I wasn't paying for Zillow. Zillow leads were coming in. We were ignoring Zillow leads, right? Sure. Literally, like, we just didn't, we had enough calls off of signs. So that mentality, when the market started shifting, all of my agents were still in an REO mindset, and nobody wanted to really work with actual clients that were first-time home buyers. And I brought in coaches and different trainers to kind of train them, but that's all they knew because they got in the business under the REO model. So I started looking at the business and was like, something has to change here. This was my first time, like, I never had, now backtracking from when I started, I didn't get my first credit card until 3 years ago. I never had any business credit. The first loan I got was 3 years before I closed my business, right? So up until that point, all my finances were, I had enough cash coming in. I kept my expenses low, and things kind of like folded because overnight it seems like all the income was just washed away, right? Yeah. So you're used to selling 30, 40 homes a month. Now you're selling, 10 a month. And that changed everything. So I started cutting staff. I started cutting other expenses, but it still wasn't, I didn't do it fast enough and soon enough, right? So all the overhead was just taking me under. And I just said, I have to make a change. I need to reset. And I told the agents, we're going to make a move. I didn't know what that move was yet. And I was introduced to somebody at KW Royal Oak. Now, prior to that, to be honest, I used to steal a lot of agents from KW. Yeah. KW was new. There wasn't a lot of brokers that were into REO at KW. And a lot of my agents came from franchise companies and they were not being fed the REO business because that's where it was at. Then fast forward, I'm telling all my agents, look, our next move is KW. and not all of them brought into it. A few of them came over. One of my agents, she actually came over and started her own team, and she ended up going to another KW office and she's successful over there. And, but yeah, overall it was, I just seen the writing on the wall that something had to change.
So let's talk about that change and what it was that made you decide to do that. Because Reggie, you could have said, hey, you saw that things needed to shift and you saw that things need to go this other direction. So you could have done that with Ritz Realty, but you were introduced to KW. And what was it that made you say, this is the right path for me at this point?
I just wasn't a good enough leader, right? I didn't have all the answers and I didn't have the time to try to figure it out. and I was always doing everything on my own. So I didn't have a mentor or the coaching. Looking back, I could have figured it out. Even when I first came to KW, um, I think Natalie had mentioned something about doing like a mega team.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what that was, right?
Yeah.
I could have literally kept every agent I had and just kept shop and just did it under the KW umbrella. I would have been a rock star right now, right? I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there were some things I could have done, but honestly, there were other things going on in my life where I needed to make some changes. I was going through a divorce because during that time, you know, you're trying to build a business, you're spending all this time. Things were changing so rapid that I just needed to kind of clean house and just start over. And KW showed me some things that I was like, wow, this is it. I wish I would have made this move 3 years sooner, and things would have been a lot different.
You know, in my experience as, and I'm a previous broker owner too, Reggie. So I owned and ran a company, which is still in business today. But said differently, what I'm hearing you say is you saw that KW was doing what you wanted to do and what you were striving to do, what you were trying to figure out to do, and then they were executing it already at a high level. And not only that they were doing it at a high level, but then they had, you know, manuals to do it and walk you through it. So it took the guesswork out of you having to figure out, well, I know that step Z is where I want to be. I'm just not sure every step in between. And here is a company filled with top leaders who can help show me. Is that
Right.
fair? Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I interviewed with other franchise offices and even a couple of different KW offices. And what I looked at, so what I started with is I looked at where all the top agents at, who had the top teams, who had the top brokers, and who was making the money, right? I wanted to go play for the Lakers. I didn't want to go and start over. I had other brokers that were independent brokers that thought we should partner up and be independent. I didn't want to go back out and struggle again. I wanted to go where people already had the answers. There were already models and systems in place. So when I looked at the whole KW model, I said, okay, here's some things that I was doing right, but I was doing a whole lot wrong. And I needed that in my life at that time. And it brought balance to my life overall. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just the right decision. It was the perfect storm. And I don't know if you guys read Who Moved My Cheese.
Sure. Of course.
It's one of them things where like you keep going back to the same place trying to get the same thing and it's not there anymore. So I realized, you know, where I was at in my life and my career that I needed a change, and I needed something and people around me that were doing, you know, so much better than myself that gave me something to strive for. So it just made sense at that time.
So your REO business drops down to next to nothing. You say this isn't going to work anymore. You tell the team, hey guys, we're going to make a move. I'm not quite sure what that is. And then you're introduced to KW and you say, this is it. So some people come and some people said, forget it, I'll just go somewhere else. And now you're at KW and you're back to kind of, I mean, I don't know, if it's like square one. Is that a fair state? Okay, cool. So you're back to, okay, I got to figure this out now. What happened? And now, what year are you in now? 2015, 14?
2015. So basically, when I came to KW, I was just an agent with a broker's license.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yep.
I mean, the feeling was I was living my life. So, you know, I'm remarried, but during that time I was single.
Yeah.
I didn't have any agents to be responsible for. Nobody was fighting over Scotch tape or any of that stuff. All I needed to do was list and sell homes, right?
Yep.
And I was responsible for myself. You know, make 80 or 100,000 a year. I was good. All my expenses were low. My ex, she had one house, I had the other home, so I didn't have a lot of expenses there. I didn't have a car note. I felt like I was starting my career over,
Yeah,
almost identical, but I was making more money,
sure.
and I had more money coming in than way more than what I needed, even though it wasn't a lot. And probably about a year in, I sat down. I said, "Wait a minute. Okay, I'm satisfied with this, but then you have Jim Schaefer over here, you have Joe Delia over here, and these guys are killing it, right?"
Yeah,
And then I'm hearing all these names, the Ben Kennys and all these other people, and in our area, Mike Perner and all these guys. I said, "Wait a minute, I know a lot too about real estate. I can do this."
yeah,
And I started looking at it like, hey, you're sitting in a moment where there's great opportunity. You have to figure out how to start taking advantage of this. So I mapped out a 5-year plan, which I'm probably a year behind now. I'm not going to blame COVID at all. It's just my my own shortcomings. So I mapped out a 5-year plan. I said, okay, I'm going to start. I'm going to finish this year out. Next year, I'm going to start building a team. I did that with some agents that were at my office before. Didn't work out. They didn't meet the standards that I needed. So I washed that team away, started over. And then I started rebuilding the team with one agent. I started following the millionaire real estate agent model. And that helped keep me on that path. So, okay, you get your assistant, then you get your buyer's agent, and so on and so forth. So that's where I'm at now in my career, just building that up. And so far, it's going very well. And yeah, it's just, you just have to take those steps back to move forward.
right. So what I'm hearing you say is you got into the ecosystem of KW and you plugged yourself in and said, okay, I'm going to follow this model because I can see what I want as a business owner. There's people here locally, nationally doing what I want to do. And what they did was follow this model in the MREA. So I'll just do that.
Right.
So it's that simple.
Right. And in all honesty, and this is being open and transparent. So in my circle of real estate agents, my sphere of influence and the people I was around, the level that people are performing in KW almost seemed foreign to me. Like I knew other agents that worked at KW, but I'm wondering now, like, what were those guys exposed to? Because, like, for example, for a single agent to do 15 million on their own was foreign to me prior to coming to KW, right? And I thought everybody that sold 15 or 20 million, they only did it because they were selling, $800,000 homes.
Right.
Right. I just didn't, I was not exposed to it. As many years as I was in real estate, most of my business was just all in Detroit. I did some Oak Park and, some suburban deals, but
Well, Reggie, was that as a result of your SOI, your sphere, is that this is where your people lived?
oh yeah, definitely.
Where were you living at this time?
So I was living in Redford.
Okay.
I grew up in Highland Park.
Oh, okay.
So let me give you the backstory a little bit. So my grandmother lived in Palmer Woods. So my first 8 years of life, I grew up in Palmer Woods. She moved away and then moved back. So I lived in Palmer Woods twice. Actually, Palmer Woods was my paper route. So
Okay.
when I was in the 8th grade, I delivered to John Sally and Doris Bisco and other people over there, right? So, but I always grew up in Highland Park, went to school in Highland Park. My first friend I didn't sell a house to my first friend or a family member until I was 28. Nobody I knew was buying homes, at that age. When they did start buying homes, they were all buying $30,000 and $40,000 homes. So my thing was to just sell a whole lot of properties, right?
Yeah. So you're not focused on the price point. It's just like, I just got to sell as many of these as I can.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
sell 70 to 100 homes a year. That's just what it was, right?
Right.
Then I didn't think to sell 100, $300,000 homes until I got to KW, and I was like, well, okay, so a couple homes that were 300 or 400,000. That's your average price point. But how many do you sell a year? And I seen somebody sell 100 of those properties. So that changed my perspective. That was just not the world I was in.
Well, but Reggie, how does someone go from, I mean, we're just going to use you as the example. Your sphere of influence is buying $30,000 to $40,000 homes max, and you
Right,
now get in, and this is just what you think happens, right? I mean,
right.
this is what you're exposed to, and then you get into a different environment where people are selling two, three, $400,000 homes. How do you, with a sphere of influence that is an average price point of 30,000, get into the higher price point?
Oh, I just pick up the phone and I just start calling the neighborhoods I wanted to do business in
Mm-hmm.
and marketing to those. And it's building your business all over again and rebranding. And like my farm area is in Southfield. I don't live in Southfield. I just do quite a bit of business there.
Yeah.
So I started focusing on, I made that one of my goals, change my average price point, right?
Okay.
So it goes from 60,000 average to 105, and then you're now at 150, then you try to get that up to 175. So now it's being intentional about where I'm marketing to. Um, at one point in time, I was not turning away any business, but now I'm just referring a lot of business away, right? So I still get paid on it. Don't
Yep.
get me wrong, but
Yep.
I don't want my team working certain price points because financially it doesn't make sense. Unless it's a certain client that we've already had a relationship with. But there's some intention about the price points we want to work now. Before I didn't have that. If someone wanted to sell or buy a $200,000 home, that's fine. If they wanted to buy or sell a $20,000 home, that's fine. But now intentionally, we try to work on a certain price point.
Well, and I think what's important about that, and when you say intentional, and that's obviously a term we use a lot at KW, it's like to hear someone say that intentionally. I'm not, I'm going to be intentional about not working a $30,000 to $40,000 price point, but what you're doing, what the action is behind that is you're actually saying, when that comes across my desk, I'm not doing it. And I think that, a lot of agents, myself included, at many points throughout my career, have said, you know what, I have to do it. I have to sell this house. I have to work with this client, even though I know going into this, I'm going to make very little money and I'm going to put more time into it. I likely won't make anything when it's all said and done, but I
Right.
got to do it. And what I'm hearing you say is you've made the decision now as the leader and said, we're not doing that. No one on this team is doing that because I now know your time is better spent elsewhere. So we'll refer that out to someone else, and then you can focus on that higher price point, whatever that looks like, calling through a higher price point neighborhood, door knocking that neighborhood, sending out flyers, open house, whatever that is. Is that fair?
Right. So there's two things. So with the price point, I have a minimum commission. So I'm charging 2,500 minimum. I don't care if the house is 10,000, 15,000, or whatever. When someone calls that wants to sell or buy at a certain price point, so I still have a lot of investor clients.
Yep.
So I'm not turning down all the business. I'm looking at the client, and so what's my return on investment for working with this client? Is this an investor that's just going to buy one house and be done? Or is this someone trying to buy 10, $20,000 homes, right? And I'm going to make 2,500 each on each property. And they're paying cash. They're going to close these all out within a week or two, right?
Yep.
That's business that I'm willing to take or have someone on my team take. But I've identified several agents within our office or within KW. I just go on command, go to referrals, and I'm blasting out referrals for people who want to lease, people who want to buy, $15,000 homes, $30,000 homes. Um, if if it's a first time home buyer that's buying a $50,000 or $60,000 home, if it's a referral from our past client, we're going to handle that client. But if it's just someone off a Zillow call, I'm going to just pick an agent in our office that to refer it to.
Sure.
So what I did was I kind of have like go-to agents for certain business, and they become like my extended team without necessarily being on a team.
Yep.
And I'm just getting 25% of all of that business without having to service it and do all the back end admin stuff.
Yeah, no, totally understand. So you're following the MREA, you're building your business, you hire your assistant, just like it says. Now here we are. We're going to just kind of fast forward through that because we know that these next few years of you building this is not fun and exciting and sexy. It's kind of boring and mundane, and you're just going through following it, right?
Right.
So now here we are today, 2019, 2020. What's your team? What's your business look like? What's your team set up?
Right now, we just have an admin, and I have a buyer's agent and another buyer's agent I just added as of October last year.
Yep.
My admin right now is part-time, so we're looking to switch that to full-time or look to replace her, possibly depending on, because I think in the MRE, he talks about capacity talent versus
Yep.
cul-de-sac talent. So I need that person to really be able to grow with the team. And Ben Kinney said something that really stood out to me. So during the team building process, originally when I was building a team, I was like, yeah, I just want to be small, maybe 2 agents and do 20 to 25 million or whatever, right? And Ben Kinney, he said one time that you don't get to decide how big your team is, your team decides, right? And my lead buyer agent is she's a rock star in talent, and she wants to grow, so I have to grow.
That's
I
awesome.
I can't put the ceiling on it. So she's the one that's kind of pushing me and
Yeah.
putting me out more to the forefront. I just wanted to be quiet and sell a bunch of houses and make some money. She's the one like, no, we have to get out there and get the exposure and build this thing and grow it as big as we can get it. And I said, fine, as long as you're going to help manage it all.
Right. Well, Gary talks about that a lot too, right? If we don't make our world big enough for them to grow in, then they'll go elsewhere. And this
Right.
sounds like someone who's pushing you to grow she wants to be in your world. So grow
Right.
your world bigger for her, and then you'll retain her, or she's going to do it regardless. So I think that's great that you've got that type of person on your team.
Right.
So let's talk some numbers of your business. Where were you, we can use 2019 if you want. What was your, volume or units or whatever?
Yeah, we were just under 10 million. We were, I think last year we closed 83 deals. I got to look back at it.
Wow.
This year our goal is 20 million. So, but what I noticed too, so comparing 18 to 19 we closed less deals, but our volume was higher. And that's because we increased our price point. This year, our goal was 20 million because we had the newer agent, but she's closing quite a few deals now. I think we're still going to make it. Right now, we're probably about 3 million behind our goals up to this point. So we're probably going to end up right about 17 million. So between 16 and 17 based on my projections. So those are some things we're working on now, but 20 million is our goal. I set 20 million based on the net amount of money that we each want to bring home.
Yep.
And for example, sometimes the volume and the units. So when people look at volume, I mentioned earlier about the minimum commission amount.
Yep.
So I can do 100,000 in volume, and that can be, 5 sales, and I'm making, $10,000. Someone else can do 100,000 on one property and make 6,000, right? So we started basing our numbers on what's our actual gross and net versus just the volume. and we look at how many units do we need to do based on our average sales price. But we did consider the volume. So that's like our template. But at the end of the day, our actual team goals are based on what we individually want to take home, because your take home pay and the amount of money that you actually put in your pocket is going to open you up to other opportunities, like the title company, investment opportunities, or being an investor in a different market center, which I'm pursuing now, by the way. So those are some things you want to look at as well. So I look at volume, but I'm more concerned. One of my coaches that I coached with before, he doesn't care about volume as much. He wants to see your tax returns.
Yeah,
That's it.
it's the profit. And that's, Gary Keller says no one's getting on stage at any of the events until he can review their P&L statement to make sure that they're actually running a legitimate, profitable business. Because we can all hide behind the GCI, right?
Right.
Yeah, I love that. A couple more questions for you. If you guys have questions for Reggie, go ahead and unmute yourself or throw them in the chat, and we'll do that. So Reggie, what would be one piece of advice you would give to a agent in their first few years, and they're trying to build, and they kind of feel like maybe they might be spinning their wheels a little bit?
Right. So I would say get coaching and some mentorship, and really focus hard. Like the seller leads is really going to give you all the leverage in the world. You can see clearly when you have that leverage and that extra time. So I would say highly and focus on the seller leads if you can. Find a system that's going to bring you at least 2 to 3 listings per month minimum. Whether you're cold calling, door knocking, FISBOs, expireds, all of those things work. You just have to get good at 2 of them.
Oh,
Right.
okay. I like that. Yeah.
Yep.
So get some coaching so you can improve your skills, and then focus on getting those leads,
Yep.
and get real good at 2 things.
Yep. Get good at, if you're going to work FISBOs and you're going to, maybe you got a good mailer campaign or something, or
Yep.
you're good at farming or door knocking. Find 1 or 2. The reason I say 2 is because the market shifts, and maybe you're real good at FISBOs, but there's not any FISBOs out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may have 5 FISBOs when you used to have 20, right? So you only have 5 opportunities to get listings. So now you may need to be good at door knocking and circle prospecting. So find 1 or 2 lead sources for seller leads, and I would focus on that first.
Okay. And then now let's kind of switch to someone who is doing well and they're looking to level up. So either they're looking to grow that team and make that first hire, or they're doing, they want to get from 5 to 8 million.
Yeah.
Tell them.
Do the same thing, but do it better.
Yeah.
Do it twice as much, but hire an assistant and get some leverage. Leverage is really the key, because it allows you more time to focus on what's most important. So don't be scared to spend the money on an assistant, even if you just have to get a VA to start out. VAs, virtual assistants, can be very inexpensive, but they can, what you're paying out, you're getting that money back 10 times. So find someone to kind of help you leverage your time and do all the unnecessary paperwork. Like my VA, she pulls all my probate information. She sets it up in my CRM under the plan, and all I do is hit print, and have someone stuff the mailers. I even trained her to make the calls. I personally like to make the calls, but she makes all the calls now because I don't have the time like I used to. And then, so just hire a VA. If you don't have the money to hire a full-time assistant, just hire a VA. It's a little bit less expensive, but you can get probably 90% of what you need done out of a VA, a good VA.
Sure. David Fisher's got a question. David, go ahead.
Okay.
Hey, Reggie. So when you're making that first hire for an agent on your team, do you look for somebody new that you can kind of teach them, show them the ropes and mold them, or do you look for somebody that's already a little less seasoned and a little less hand holding?
So it really depends on where you are at in your career. So if you're making your first hire, like personally, I used to turn agents away because I was not ready to give them what I think they deserve, right? So a brand new agent, let's say someone left their job to get into real estate, right? Can you honestly say you're going to give them enough leads and enough business and mentorship and training to help them make a living? If not, do not hire that person just to say you have a team, right? My first good buyer's agent that I have now, she was already in the business, so she was used to sales. She was not a capper, so I knew I can personally take her past capping and making some good money. So that was the only reason I hired her, and she was already committed to the process. Up to this point, I'm just not ready to hire a brand new agent that's wet behind the ears, because now I feel like I have a system in place to where I can put some money in their pocket if they do the right things. So don't hire anybody if you can't. In other words, when you hire an agent, you're basically supporting that agent's lifestyle if they do the work. So you have to be able to feed them as well.
Makes sense,
Thanks,
David?
Reggie.
And then we got another question in here, Reggie. Do you still prospect yourself every day, or have you hired that all out to an ISA?
No, I prospect. So I'm not to the point where I have an ISA yet. Again, my VA, she makes, she goes through the list. I have a set list of calls and follow-up calls that I have her make. So maybe leads that came in the system a year ago, she'll call those. But I still prospect. I still do circle prospecting. Then I have her follow up 2 or 3 days later, because sometimes people need to hear a different voice. Or if I'm calling in the morning, she's going to go in Mojo and she's going to hit everybody that was not a contact, but she's going to call them in the evening. So we kind of tag team that. But yeah, I still prospect.
Awesome. You know, I always say the rainmaker, the agent, whatever it is, wherever you are, in your career on a team or whatever it is, the agent always is the best at that conversion. And that's the one thing that we should always be doing, is the prospecting for ourselves. The future follow-up and stuff you can totally leverage out, but you got to make that connection, ask the right questions, and establish yourself as that person for them. So I love that you're still doing all that prospecting and you're on the phone. Your buyer's agents, you require them to be doing a certain amount of prospecting each day?
Yeah, so mainly my objective for my buyer's agents every day is just follow up with the incoming leads that come in. Now, my my main buyer's agent, one day she came to me and said, because she had a couple listings, she said, I don't want to work listings anymore. And I was like, all right. And 2 days later, she got 3 listings in a row. So even though they're buyer's agents, they still get listings. And, I teach them all the tools and tricks that, hey, when you have a listing, this is what you personally need to do. You need to circle prospect around that listing. When it goes pending, you need to circle prospect around the listing. When it sells, you personally need to circle prospect around that listing. It has a different impact because I allow my agents to put their own signage up with their name on it. So if they're known in that area, if they have any traction, I'd rather someone that already has some traction and momentum in that area than instead of me just coming in saying, hey, we sold this property or whatever. So that's a requirement. But yeah, mainly the number one objective is I'm spending money on these buyer leads. I need you guys to spend, an hour or 2 a day just following up.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Reggie, out of respect for your time, it is 10:30. I want to let you get back because I know you're trying to get to that 20 million and I don't want to keep you from that. Any last words or anything that you want to share?
Yeah, read the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. right? One of the best books you can do as an agent, read as an agent, because it'll help you understand business model and structures more. Yeah, constantly read. I mean, there's a lot of books out there that you can read. I think that's going to help you. I would highly recommend taking a language of sales class.
Mm-hmm.
I just finished up, and that was awesome.
Yeah, I've taken that. It's great.
Yeah, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Go get some listings. The best way to win the highest and best situation is to be the listing agent.
Isn't that right? Well, Reggie, I appreciate your time this morning. It's been great. If anybody has questions offline, can they just can they look you up on Kelly and reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm an open book. Agents call me all the time. I'm a director with the Detroit Association of Realtors.
Uh-huh.
So I'm somewhat an unofficial coach. So people call me all the time with questions. Sure. So anybody that calls me, they know I answer any question that I can. I'm an open book pretty much.
Awesome. So you guys can reach out. If you're watching this on a recording, reach out to Reggie, look him up on Kelly. He's out of our Royal Oak, which is the KW Metro office. And hey, thanks again, Reggie. Would it be okay if maybe we have John on another episode, maybe once you hit that 20 million?
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much again.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.